Hello, my darlings, and welcome back to Radio Wasteland, the best in paranormal radio. I am your host, Chauncey Hallworth, and this is my co-host, Kara Kittrick.
Hello.
Kara, do you have some news for us this evening?
I sure do. So let's run down the list.
Let's hear it.
So everyone's tallying up their 2018 UFO sightings, and the numbers are in for Colorado, which had 106 reported sightings last year. Notables include a boomerang-shaped craft with bright colors hovering over Grand Valley, and a craft spotted early in the morning by a 13-year-old boy. It was described as being, quote, indescribable, with indescribable colors. Airport officials in Madrid are baffled by a mysterious plane that was apparently abandoned on the tarmac without explanation. The McConnell Douglas MD-87 has been sitting on the tarmac for years, but no one really knows who it belongs to. Authorities have determined that it is indeed the only plane on the tarmac currently abandoned, but there's no word on what prompted people to finally notice the aircraft's presence. If no one comes forward to claim it in 3 months, it will be sold in public auction. And Bigfoot has been captured on video in Provo, Utah. This isn't the first time Bigfoot has shown up in the area either. A few years ago, a different video was recorded of a large dark figure on the road. And in 2017, traffic cameras captured some startling Bigfoot footage. The Church of Latter-day Saints has not been able to confirm whether or not Bigfoot is in fact a Mormon. And finally, the Express reports that contrary to the claims of certain religious fundamentalists, the world did not end on the super blood wolf moon earlier this month. However, the Express is a tabloid paper, and I haven't been able to independently confirm with any other outlets whether or not the end times have come. On the same note, flat earthers have attributed the eclipse to a mysterious, quote, shadow object. That's all that happened last week, except that Roger Stone was indicted, but who cares? Back to you, Chauncey.
All right. I definitely have a question about this. I'm not sure if you're going to know. The super blood wolf moon?
Yeah.
Are
this
like
is a pretty special moon.
It is. So I've heard of a blood moon, and I've heard of a super moon. And I assume those are put together to make a super blood moon.
Yeah.
But what makes it wolfy?
Just the time of year.
The time of year makes it wolfy?
January, yeah. There are names for every different full moon. Like the full moon, I think, in October is the hunter's moon.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Oh, that is pretty cool. All right.
Like, they're all really cool.
I was ready to mock this, but this is cool.
No, I like to impress people by saying, you know.
So is it a Native American thing?
It's a Native American
That's where we're getting it from?
Yeah.
All right. So, I'm into it. So,
So it was a blood wolf moon. Yeah.
Also, Bigfoot's a Mormon.
Maybe. We don't know.
You know, how do
But he shows up in Utah a fair amount.
Yeah. How do Mormons feel about evolution? I know that a lot of different religions have different views of it. So I wonder how Mormons in general, well, I don't know, I mean, I understand that, but Mormonism, there doesn't seem to be a huge amount of sects of Mormonism. There seems to be 2 or 3 or something like that.
That's true. I don't think the LDS Church in Salt Lake City has come out and said evolution is true.
All right, but
I don't think they've said anything for or against, but that's kind of me guessing because I don't know for sure.
Yeah, I'm just curious how they feel about Bigfoot. If they're just whatever.
Yeah, well, I mean, one can believe in Bigfoot and not believe in evolution, and vice versa.
Right. Certainly
vice versa.
And also in the news there, are we going to sick some ghost hunters on this plane before it gets pulled off the tarmac?
Yeah, this was a strange story.
It was, man. That is awesome.
Yeah, so
disturbing though that here we are in this. I didn't mean to cut you off. Tell me.
No, so I found this when I was just looking for ghost sightings in last week's articles, and I saw ghost plane in Madrid airport, and I saw there were a couple of articles. And I'm like, okay, what you got? And the story was even weirder than I expected, because I expected grainy footage of something that looks like a face in the window of a ghost, but no, this is just like. No one knows who this plane belongs to. It's been there for years, and we just thought, hey, the movie it's been there for a while.
The movie that it makes me think of is Warm Bodies, how he hangs out in his house is like a old airplane? Do you know? Have you seen Warm Bodies with the zombies? It's
I have no idea what you're talking about.
It's like Romeo and Juliet retold, but about zombies.
Okay.
It's awesome. All right. But I got to say, with the ghost plane, so here we are coming out of, and it's not a ghost plane, the abandoned plane. You know, it's kind of more like a hatchback Honda Civic at the end of an undeveloped cul-de-sac. But
it's a little bit more unusual for it to be a commercial airliner in a very much developed airport in the capital of a major
here we are
country.
coming out of the government shutdown, you know, and everybody's just, we need to get the government back up and running now because, like, our air isn't safe.
Otherwise, things might slip through the cracks.
Right, and these people are paying attention. Right, and it turns out they had a derelict airplane on the tarmac.
Yeah, well, just to reiterate, this was in Madrid. So this was in Spain. It wasn't affected by the shutdown, but it's like...
I don't know.
We'd better reopen the government so our airports get back to normal.
All right. So apparently, I'll let him go on that.
This isn't actually the first time this has happened. There was... There was another case just like this. No one knew who the jet, you know, it wasn't some little biplane. It was a jet for carrying lots of passengers. But there was one in, I think, what was it? Kuala Lumpur.
Right.
Watch,
we're going to find out.
2015.
We're going to find out that this thing like disappeared like 60 years ago or something in the Bermuda Triangle, and it just kind of showed up there.
That would make me so happy.
Wouldn't that be rad?
Well, if that happens, you'll hear the follow up here on Radio Wasteland.
And then, of course, alien sightings is very fitting for tonight because tonight we have our guest William Pullin coming back, and we are going to talk about famous UFO hoaxes.
Right.
And but. Yeah, I never thought about the statistics coming in for what had happened last year.
Yeah, and you know what happens every
that's
year.
Interesting. Yeah.
There's a national UFO reporting hotline, and there's other, you know, MUFON keeps track of a lot of numbers, and
seeing how
you can tally this stuff up.
Seeing how tonight our topic is UFO hoaxes, I wonder if there's a correlation between the amount of sightings and the amount of, mental health or prescription medication issues. You know, there's a lot of data there to be compared.
I would guess so.
Government just took it seriously. Because going back, Utah has the most amount of people prescribed prescription like painkillers and stuff like that out of the entire country. They have the largest prescription problem of the entire country, and it's Utah. And I lived in Utah for 6 months. And when I lived there, this was the case then too. And they actually had commercials on TV of like an old silent film of somebody like running around and hitting their head and stuff. And the commercial was basically telling people to be careful and not to hit their head.
Huh.
Which I'm assuming there was some sort of correlation there. And then the other thing that was really funny was they had commercials on TV for their most wanted person who had beaten one guy up and stole a car. And he was the number one most wanted person in the state.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to feel wanted.
Well, all he did was beat somebody up and steal a car. I mean, you know, in Redding, California, the most wanted person did more than that, you know?
Yeah, no, you're right.
All right. You're listening to Radio Wasteland. Coming back, we got William Pullin talking about famous UFO hoaxes. You don't want to miss it. Come on back. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland and our guest, William Pullin, and our topic tonight is famous UFO hoaxes. William, you there with us?
I am here.
How are you doing this evening?
I'm good. Ready to talk to UFOs, which is a change of pace. I haven't done that in like 10 hours. So.
Right, yeah, totally. Yeah, you are definitely our resident UFO expert. So,
yeah. Well, we don't want you to be getting withdrawals here, so we'd better dive into it.
I appreciate your efforts.
I'm getting the shakes, man.
So recently in the news, you know, we made this parallel earlier because that BuzzFeed article had come out about Donald Trump saying that he, had done some stuff. And then the Mueller investigation came out and said, no, he didn't do this, leading people to believe, does that mean that he did all these other things? And we had brought up that sort of comparison saying, you know, does paying attention to hoaxes in the UFO community, do you think that it helps the UFO community or do you think that it hurts it? to call out and address these hoaxes?
I've been of the opinion that it helps, because certainly there's some cases out there that have seemed to just rear their ugly head again year after year and have been debunked, and then they just kind of resurface. I think if you just look at the evidence of a case, and if the evidence shows the case is not legitimate, to my way of thinking, that means you have the opportunity to not spend any more energy or time on a case that's not legitimate.
Yeah.
Because you're aware of it's a hoax, it's been disproven, time to move forward. If you're not aware of hoaxes, then a lot of energy and time and money is spent investigating something that won't bear any fruit. So that's an issue. And I think it does help. It helps the community. It helps it being perceived in a more legitimate, objective light instead of a group of people that believe everything.
Right, right. Here on the show one time, I'll leave names out of it, but we had a guest on that we felt wasn't perpetuating a hoax on purpose, but we felt had fallen victim to a hoax. He was talking about some video of an alien telling us that he was from the far future and he was actually evolved humanity, and that he had come back in time to save the humpback whales or whatever it is.
Right, and it wasn't too difficult to find out that the video was produced by a well-known hoaxer.
Yeah.
So, and special effects.
That happens all the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
It really does.
And so, I mean, I can totally understand why people are doing it now in the day of social media and in the day and age of, marketing and viral marketing and so on and so forth. But, I've always been a little shocked at what some of the people's motivations were to do it prior to that.
Yeah, and I'm at a loss to explain any motivation for that. I don't know why, and maybe it's just me, I'm projecting my own thoughts on it. It would never occur to me to hoax a UFO case. I don't know what the motivation is. There's no...
Or I assume anything for that matter,
Yeah, I mean, is there money to be gained? Is there position to be gained? I guess there would be in some circumstance, but I don't know. From my take, it just muddies the water. It really does, because you're trying to search out the cases that are legitimate, that remain unexplained, and focus on them, and stay aware of hoaxes. Stay aware of them as opposed to away from them. But there's always going to be individuals in the community, and not just UFOs. We could talk politics, we could talk the whole 9 yards, everything, that will believe something at face value without doing their homework. Mm-hmm. And even if the evidence is brought forward to debunk that belief, they will stand their ground and still believe something that, even though the vast majority of the evidence shows it to be illegitimate, they'll still believe it. So, and that's very prevalent in the UFO field.
Yeah, and it seems to be getting all the more disturbing, at least to me, in our society. The conversation of evolution had come up, and I saw this funny comic that basically said something to the effect of evolution ? Well, first you're going to have to convince me that science even exists, and and we live in this world
it's
where
not even a joke for a lot of people.
It's not, and it's like very, very disturbing, that people aren't willing to, I sum this up for people, and this is more so for the listening audience than the two of you, and I like to remind people that up until about Benjamin Franklin, one man had the ability to have a general idea of all the world's sciences. But since then, that's just not an option. So we have to rely on our scientific communities, or we wouldn't have computers. We wouldn't have cell phones. We wouldn't have these things. These men and these women are doing this stuff, and we need to trust the fact that the scientists are doing it. I mean, you can be a little bit skeptical, but when it comes to some of this stuff, you got to just straight up believe the science, and people just don't seem to want to do that.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I mean, now science doesn't have all the answers.
No, sure. Of course not.
But it's a great foundation to build from that. You have to start with science, and then with some level of informed speculation, try to figure things out that science is unable to at this point. And science is, to use another term, science is evolving. Science 100 years ago could explain a certain amount of Mother Nature's characteristics. I mean, whatever the branch of science was, but give it every 100 years, give it enough time, our knowledge of the universe develops through science.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
what we think is impossible now may not be impossible in 200 years or even 50 years. I mean, back in the 40s, you had scientists that stated that we would not be able to go to the moon. Mm-hmm. And we did it, 29 years later.
Did we go to the
moon? We're talking about famous UFO hoaxes.
This is a prime example of one of those
I
things.
go by the evidence. Yeah, we did.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, I'm a firm. My two things that just really just kind of piss me off is when people mess with space and mess with dinosaurs, because as a kid, that was what developed me as a child. It's like getting to the moon, going out into space. These people really did this stuff, and that really inspired me. And then dinosaurs, people saying, well, dinosaurs didn't exist and God put the bones there to make you question your faith or something like that. I'm just all man, I cannot have this conversation. The other one I can't do, and I'm sorry for anybody out there, I can't do flat earth. I can't do it.
Except we did do it one time.
Yeah, and I can't do it. It's just too ridiculous.
I think all three of us are in the same boat. Yeah.
All right, so we only got about 3 or 4 minutes till we go to break here, but let's get this started. What would you say is the most famous UFO hoax?
I guess the best known one of recent times was probably the Alien Autopsy video. That was back in '95.
Yeah, I totally.
That was broadcast over national. I think Fox broadcast it at the time, and it was pretty apparent it was a hoax to the person that was just generally informed about the UFO issue. You could tell it was a hoax. And then as researchers really attacked the video and tried to find out whether it was legitimate or not, it didn't hold up under scrutiny. It was proved to be a hoax. So that's in recent memory.
Right. I remember this. I was a VHS kid. I was all about collecting VHSs, and I think I actually ordered that and actually had it. I would have been, 19 or 20 at the time. And and I remember watching
I have a copy of DVD. I'm looking at my copy right now. It's in my archives, and I never watch it. Yeah. I have it.
Well, I remember watching it saying, even if it was real, how could you tell? I mean, maybe aliens are made of rubber. We don't know. But it's like, I don't know. We don't know what we're looking at. It's like, what is there to tell? But I assume that the impact of this was just like a lot of the time was kind of mockery, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yeah. Yeah, and it kind of an open arena. It was openly mocked. Yeah. It was so the quality was such a low value. It was openly mocked. It was pretty apparent for even an individual that was not an expert in film editing or film quality or disciplines of that angle. It was apparent to them it was a hoax to the everyday person.
Right.
So. That's the one that's vivid in my memory of recent times, and that's what is that now, 24 years or something. So
yeah, that was my go-to as well when I was thinking of the most standout to me. Well, we're coming up on break here. You are listening to William Pullin on Radio Wasteland. We're talking about famous UFO hoaxes. Come on back. We got some more to talk about. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland. I normally don't make it a point to acknowledge the music that's playing, but man, I love the Ramones and Joey Ramone, and I love the version of that song.
He was doing the little dance to it.
Very cool.
Yeah, I was doing a little dance to it. All right, you're listening to William Pullin here on Radio Wasteland, and we're talking about famous UFO hoaxes. William, before we went to break, we were talking about the Alien Autopsy, and so I think it's generally accepted that it's a hoax, but I don't know much about it beyond that. Do we know that it's a hoax? Do we know who perpetuated it and that it is actually a hoax?
There was a gentleman by the name of Ray Santilli that was attached to the film. He was very reluctant to release slides of the film for examination to determine the age, the quality of the film, if the film matched up with the time frame, because it was kind of implied that the film was from the late 40s in Roswell, or it was attached to that case. So that didn't transpire. There wasn't much anything physical done to the film. And then there were other snippets or parts of the film that he stated were in existence, but those never surfaced. So it goes both ways. You can look at a case, or I guess like an autopsy video, and say, well, is there proof that it's legitimate? Is the proof there? I don't know. It hasn't come to light, and but somebody else might look at it in a different light. Someone else might say, "Well, it hasn't been disproven." So it's a never-ending struggle in the UFO community to try to prove or disprove a case. But it's one of those rare instances where the vast majority of researchers feel it's just a hoax, and that conclusion was arrived at pretty quickly, which is usually not what happens in this field.
Right.
Usually a definitive explanation kind of drags on. It doesn't really appear for a long time. So,
Do we know of any hoaxes that were straight up perpetuated hoaxes for the purpose of, I don't mean for the purpose of marketing somebody's running shoe or something like that, but for the purpose of perpetuating them as a UFO investigator? Do we know of anybody who was straight up caught doing it, trying to further their career?
I know of a few hoax cases where an individual was trying to portray their military service in a higher light than really was. There were a couple of brothers I recall. Gosh, this is the late '60s. They took a series of supposed UFO photographs. I think it was January of '67. Dan and Grant, they have an odd last name, Jaroslav. Dan and Grant Jaroslav. They lived in Mount Clemens, Michigan, and they took a series of photographs, and they were examined by NICAP, APRO, and the U.S. Air Force. And in '67, Dr. J. Allen Hynek was still attached to Project Blue Book. It was still in existence, and Hynek felt that there was no evidence of a hoax. So he felt that the photographs were legitimate because there was no evidence that they were manufactured. There was no evidence of any kind of hoax. There was no evidence that they weren't legitimate. So he accepted them at face value. And the two brothers ended up writing him a letter in 1976 stating that they were hoaxed.
Oh,
interesting.
So they pulled the wool over Hynek's eyes.
Oh, they fessed up.
And I've written about that in my group. That's a prime example of how a trained observer, a scientific mind, can make an error and accept evidence that certainly looks legitimate, but it turns out it isn't. It's a very slippery slope. It's an individual has to be very careful when they research these things because some things are hoaxed and not legitimate, but certainly look very legitimate. If you make one mistake like that, the public tends to look at you like, well, this guy made a mistake. Well, he's not objective. He's not thorough, and it may be just a case of human error. And that was the case then. So
yeah, I guess it takes us back to what we were saying before about the science and so on and so forth. So I guess I need to put myself in my place. But recently in the news here, they had discovered, like in Scotland, they discovered a henge of stones, and they thought it was thousands of years old. They carbon dated it. They thought it was thousands of years old. And the prior owner of the property finally came forward and said, "Hey, wait, no, I built that thing. That isn't even real." And so the science was, saying that it was, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
So
and I'm sure there are individuals that still believe in the legitimacy of that, even though the owner of the property said he built it.
Yeah. So in the UFO community,
they want to believe.
They are. Yeah. In the UFO community, is there a lot of infighting and argument over these hoaxes? Is there a lot of yes, it is, no, it isn't, and so on and so forth?
Oh yeah, just a little. Yeah, there is. On a personal level, I get quite a few emails from other individuals. Some are not researchers. Some are just members of the community that I know in passing. Mm-hmm. That I just have a different take on certain cases, and they give me. I just get a little pushback. Like, how can you think that's a hoax, or why don't you think that's legitimate? And my response is always, well, the evidence does not show that. I take great pains to not have any preconceived notions. I guess the elephant in the room. Take Roswell for example. I would love for it to be extraterrestrial. I would like for the explanation to be extraterrestrial. Unfortunately, without a piece of the craft, we'll never be able to prove it. The available evidence leads you there, but doesn't get you there. But again, when you look at the evidence, you can't have a preconceived notion. It's like, I guess it's like a police officer investigating a case. He has to look at just the evidence and not assume any kind of explanation. He can't go in there with any kind of idea as to what transpired. He needs to just go strictly by the evidence. But that's not how people do in the UFO field. They have their positions, and they dig in. And despite whatever evidence comes to the forefront, they stick with their positions, as opposed to, it seems like researchers that are flexible, that change their mind according to the available evidence, are looked down upon for some reason. And I think that's unfortunate. So
I think that's across the board in our society. It's like it happens really bad with politicians, where they say something and then they change their mind and say, hey, I was wrong, this is what's right, and they just never recover. Nobody is allowed to change their stance, to grow, or to think something different, when really that probably should be the core of respect for anybody, is when somebody is willing to publicly change,
Yeah, either you've changed your mind, your position, or the dreaded, I don't know.
Right. Yeah. I don't know is an acceptable answer. I have to remind my kids of this on a regular basis. I'm just all, hey, well, what was going on here, that, and the other way? And I can see them look at me with this dead deer in headlights stare, and I have to remind them, I'm all, I don't know is an acceptable answer. And they're just all, oh, good, I don't know.
I mean, it's, I recall it. I made this. I always make this statement to people, and I know in passing in the UFO field. I said, it's amazing. It never ceases to amaze me how many individuals in the UFO community state openly that they have all the answers, that they know what's going on.
Oh yeah, that's an immediate.
I find that just preposterous. It's like, okay, well, if you know the answers, share. We all want to know,
right?
That's just that statement in itself just makes no sense.
Yeah, that's a no-go for me when it comes to religion, research, anything. Anybody who tries to tell me that they have the answers, I'm immediately skeptical of.
Yeah, that's a red flag, very much so.
All right, well, we're coming up on break here. You're listening to William Pullin on Radio Wasteland. We're talking about famous UFO hoaxes, and we're going to talk about another one, so stick around, come on back, do what you do. It's a Radio Wasteland. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland. We're talking about famous UFO hoaxes with William Pullin. William, earlier today we were talking on the Facebook. Kara just came down on me for fraternizing with the
guests.
Gotta
stay objective, dude.
Uncalled for.
Really.
I'm not a journalist. I'm an entertainer. The Aztec
this is why
case,
people don't trust the news.
The Aztec case of 1948 is something that you brought up, and I've never heard of this before. What's that one?
That's supposedly a UFO crash in March 25th of 48 in Hart Canyon up in Aztec, New Mexico. That's far northwest New Mexico. That story originated from two guys, Salas Newton and Leo Gebauer. Two gentlemen that were convicted of fraud in 1953. They told this story to Frank Scully, and the story appeared in Behind the Flying Saucers, which was a book that was published in 1950. A few years after that, J.P. Kane, who was people aren't sure if he was a reporter or a stringer for the San Francisco Chronicle, investigated the case and found that it was a hoax. And the entire UFO community accepted that. Another book was written about the UFO case, the same case in 86, and another one in 2015. So this is a case that's been debunked several times, but it keeps rearing its ugly head. There's no first-hand witnesses, no documentation. There's no physical evidence. And the witnesses that come forward are not first-hand. They've heard it from a friend through a friend, or they heard it second-hand or third-hand. So there's no evidence there to really put a story together. Newton and Gebauer, their story described the crash of the UFO. There were 16 bodies found inside the ship. They were between 38 and 42 inches tall, and they were dressed in 1890 garb. As to why extraterrestrials would be dressed in clothing from 1890, I have no idea. They were supposedly from Venus, and we kind of know Venus is not the point of origin, unless they can defeat 900-degree temperatures.
All right.
So the story just doesn't hold up. But there's a significant percentage of the UFO community that buys the story. I just keep searching for some direct documentation or physical evidence to show that something occurred, and there's nothing there. And yet it survives the story. So
I'm guessing here, I'm guessing here, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you read a lot of UFO books, and I'm guessing here that you have read the book that came out most recently about this debunked thing, So what is he citing? What is the author?
The Aztec UFO incident.
Yeah, so what is the author citing in here that made him decide to write a book about it?
Yeah.
If there's no evidence.
Not to drop names, I mean, Stan Friedman, who's a significant figure in the UFO community, believes in the legitimacy of the case. He believes strongly in the amount of research done in the book. I just strongly disagree. I just don't see I don't see anything there that's firsthand, physical, documented to lead us to believe that something occurred there. But I have a pretty high standard of what I'll accept. Right. And anything less than firsthand, it almost comes to a point where testimony without any kind of other corroborating evidence, whether physical or not, is just a story. Right. And maybe I'm just being too harsh, but that's my take on it. So,
well, I mean, it doesn't come anywhere close to science, and I realize that a lot of UFO research doesn't come close to science because science is recreating and so on and so forth. But it at least comes close enough to say, hey, well, we got something to work with here. But if you have nothing to work with, I mean,
yeah, police work isn't science either, but it's objective in theory.
Right. So, William, there's one that I remember that I'm hoping that you know about because I only saw the footage quickly in passing, and I just don't remember. But basically, it was some kind of, I'm going to get this wrong. Let's say it was like an Apollo lander or something, and they opened it up, and it was in color, and there was this sort of like sparkly, sort of somewhat pretty as one can be, that looks like they're half human, half gray alien thing in it. Have you ever seen what I'm talking about, or have I explained it well enough?
I have. Yeah.
You have?
So that's impressive.
Okay. So I assume this was a hoax.
That's what I think is a hoax.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my first inkling was, okay, well, if an extraterrestrial entity was somehow connected or was in the proximity or what have you, one of the Apollo missions, you and the three of us would never hear about it. Right. It wouldn't be something that would be exposed to the general public. It certainly wouldn't be put on YouTube for all the world to see. That was my first take on it.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
So I can't let you go here. We're not too far away from the end of the interviews portion. I can't let you go here without asking you, what's your take on crop circles?
I don't know. There are some crop circles that have appeared, and there have been UFO sightings in close proximity, geographically and also in time, to those crop circles appearing. Excuse me. But there's other ones that are standalone cases that clearly are man-made, and there's some that are unexplained that have nothing to do with UFOs. I have no idea what's going on, and I'll be the first one to admit I've never really delved into that little subgenre of UFO research. So I'm kind of my take is kind of somewhat uninformed, but I have no idea what's going on over there.
Yeah, to me, I always thought it was just kind of obvious that it wasn't a thing. But I just didn't know how much stock anybody puts in it because, for one, some of the first original famous ones were an artistic hoax. And then on top of that, why are they doing that? Why would they do that? I guess it's weird to put human beliefs on what they're doing, but maybe they're intergalactic graffiti artists. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if none of us really know. There's a percentage of people that do believe there's a UFO connection. They're trying to communicate with us or something like that.
Right.
I don't know. I've heard that for many years.
Yeah, and that's the weirdest part to me is like they're trying to communicate with us. You know, they can travel across the universe. They can create super intricate patterns in cornfields, but they can't figure out how to write hello on a piece of paper. You know, it's like I don't know. I don't know about all that.
Of course, that could be a reflection on us.
That's true.
We're just not intelligent enough to decipher it.
They might be up there going like, they can't figure out that the little swirl means A. You know, they got Morse code, but they can't figure out the little swirl. You know, I don't know. All right, so we're at the end here, William. Why don't you tell our audience a little bit about where they can find more about you and your Facebook group?
Oh, I'm going to plug my group out. Outrageous.
You got it.
People can find me at UFO'Real, a historical review. It's an interactive Facebook group. That's where I do the vast majority of my group. The rest of my time is just spent working or occasionally appearing on the radio with you guys. And or you can look me up on my personal page on Facebook, or my personal page, I guess it is. But UFO'Real, a historical review, is where I do the vast majority of my writing and reporting and interacting with the UFO community. So that's where everyone can find me.
Well, sounds good. Everybody check it out. We're, of course, members, and we very much enjoy it. And it is a well-moderated, because as soon as anybody gets too ornery, they're out. Really, the purpose of the group seems to be like, let's have a realistic discussion about this.
Yep.
Yeah, cordial. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much for being on Radio Wasteland, William. You've been listening to William Pullin talking about famous UFO hoaxes, friend of the show. You've heard him talk about UFOs before. You'll hear him talk about UFOs again. Thanks for checking us out. All right. Welcome back to Radio Wasteland. You've been listening to our guest, William Pullin, as we've been talking about some famous UFO hoaxes. Kara, I assume that you didn't find a lot of these hoaxes shocking, you know, because a lot of them are out there. But I gotta ask you, you know, what do you think people's? I realize you're a millennial, you're a young person, so you're a digital native, practically, or maybe fully.
Indeed.
But a lot of these hoaxes happened long before viral marketing.
Yes.
What do you think? Why would people do this?
Power.
Just power to know that in themselves? Like,
yes. Not real physical power, but a feeling of power. Okay, so years ago I was reading a book called The Sociopath Next Door. It's all about sociopaths, and, you know, it's a fascinating disorder. So it's a good book.
Right.
Anyway.
Sounds fun.
So it was talking about how the hallmark of a lot of people like this is, you know, that they don't really have empathy. They don't have a lot of emotions that motivate a normal person in their everyday life. So the thing that really motivates them is kind of like game playing behavior.
Right, yeah.
There was a story of one particular guy, diagnosed sociopath, not particularly intelligent. He was called the Stamp Man because what he would do is he would go to a post office and he would steal all of their stamps, and then he would just go across the street and watch.
As people
rushed around trying to figure out, oh my God, who stole our stamps? That's such a weird thing to do. He did it because it was funny for him.
What an empty life.
Yeah, but, you know, he got caught. He went to jail. Then he got out. Then he did it again. He did it over and over again. That's all he did.
Yeah,
that's all he cared about. So I can absolutely believe the UFO hoaxes strike me as just a more complex version of playing that particular game.
Of the stamp game, you know.
No, I don't even think that's what all of them are. But I think at its essence, you can kind of chalk it up to some people have to get their kicks in weird ways.
Yeah, I definitely, in thinking about the hoaxes, I definitely thought about, I think it was Kids in the Hall. It was an episode of Kids in the Hall. Parents out there who are listening with your children, plug their ears for a second. It's an episode where this guy's all about what he refers to as his ass pennies.
Sure.
And so what he does is he takes a bunch of pennies and he puts them in his behind.
As you do.
And then he uses them as change to spread them across the world, so that when he's out in the world, he feels he has power over people because he can yell at them and tell them that they've touched his ass pennies.
A little weird, but I'm still with you.
Yeah, well, that's pretty much it. And it was a skit on Kids in the Hall. And
I'm glad it doesn't get worse.
And I always thought it was just so ridiculously funny. But when I think about hoaxes and stuff like that,
it's kind of that, isn't it?
It makes me think of the ass pennies. And I'm just all that is like totally just disturbing that life is so empty, I guess, that people do this.
Well, it's not their fault that life is empty.
I think it is their fault, you know.
It's a procession of meaningless happenstances that ends in catastrophe.
Well, I don't know. What about the saying there's no such thing as being bored, there's just boring people, or there's no such thing as boring situations, just boring people?
I think there are both.
You think there are boring situations? The DMV? I don't know. I went to the DMV with Harley, and we had fun.
Oh, okay.
Although I think she might have been bored.
What if you're just alone?
Yeah. Solitary confinement is boring until you start hallucinating, actually. That's fair.
Well, I think there is a point where it becomes torture. So
No. I meant that there's no people involved when you're alone. It's just boring.
Yeah, but you're there.
Oh, so okay, that makes sense.
Right. You know, you're boring.
I gotcha.
Because you're there being bored, you know, instead of, doing what exciting people do, which is Lord knows what.
Yeah.
You know, watch TV mainly, I guess.
Is that what you do?
More than I'd like.
Yeah, okay.
But less than most, I think.
Okay.
I really only watch movies. I don't watch much TV. I really only watch movies. But, actually, after the break, I'm going to talk to you about some TV that I've been watching. You're listening to Radio Wasteland. Come on back. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland. I have to check myself. I have to put myself in check and find out what Kara here thinks. So a couple of months ago, weeks ago, I don't know, as I get older, spans of time, I talk to my wife and I'm all, oh, you remember that the other day? And she's all, that was like 5 years ago. So I'm no good at this stuff anymore. But we were talking about watching Supergirl, which I'm ashamed that I watched. And they had a transgender actress on there.
Right.
And I was complaining that, okay, here comes a transgender actress and now she's an alien. She's not transgender. And so I watch it the other night and it turns, so in the storyline, she's half alien and she's also trans.
Okay.
And of her alien species, she has a sister. And they have like some sort of magical dream power. And this power is supposed to be passed from mother to daughter. So her sister's thinking she's going to get it the whole time. But the trans girl gets it, gets the magical wishing powers, the dream powers.
Oh, that's kind of interesting.
So they did bring in some of the trans into it in a non-alien capacity, I guess.
Okay, I'm still not going to watch it.
Believe me, I am not trying to sell this show to you. I'm like ashamed to even bring it up, but I was bashing the show, and so I figure I have to check myself and say,
well, right, I'm happy they got some, legitimate representation in there.
Well, the sad part is...
it would have been nice if it was a good show that had that, but, totally. You can't have everything in life.
Well, here's the really sad part about it is I realized when it happened that when she said, oh, and I'm trans in the car with Supergirl, that a lot of people might have been, oh my God, she's trans. We had no idea. We thought she was so hot. We had no idea, blah, blah, blah. All the things that people would say.
Sure.
And the sad part is that apparently I'm such a nerd that I read the article and all this stuff, and I knew from the get-go, so I expected it all to be told to me in the beginning. So I think I might be the one who has a problem here because I was expecting it all to be handed to me right at once. And really they did the smart thing and they leaked it out there because, they're trying to sell this show.
Supergirl writers, you get a pass this time.
Yeah.
But I will never forgive you for the 10 episodes or whatever I watched of season 1.
Right. You'll never get that
you hear me.
Your life back. All right. You're listening to Radio Wasteland. Come on back and find out what's going on next week. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland. Next week on Radio Wasteland, Kara, we got Nicole Strickland to talk about the Queen Mary.
Excellent.
Have you ever been to the Queen Mary?
I've never been, unfortunately. I haven't really been to any haunted locations.
Jared's been to the Queen Mary, just like I have.
I have, and it's
It's a big boat.
It's just, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, walk through
I
it.
really don't have much more to say about it than that.
It's opulent. It's cool. There's a lot of history there.
Sure.
And to me, it's close on two levels. One level is for the same reason that Jared, as a kid, I went to this thing with my family. It's nostalgic for me. The other reason is when I was in fourth grade, I was 9 years old. I went on a trip to London with my dad, and we went on the sequel to the sister ship to the Queen Mary. So the Queen Mary was built by a company called Cunard. They build luxury liners, not vacation liners like Carnival Cruise, but luxury liners like Titanic style luxury liners. And they made the Queen Mary, and the Queen Mary actually had a sister ship, the Queen Elizabeth, which was 10 feet shorter. It was 10 feet smaller. And the Queen Mary the Queen Elizabeth went for years after the Queen Mary and was eventually retired. And they built the Queen Elizabeth II, the QE2.
Okay.
And the QE2 is what I took across the Atlantic when I was in fourth grade. And so it's really interesting to see that. And then they went on and actually made a Queen Victoria. Now they actually have a Queen Mary too, which was they're all made by Cunard.
The sequel.
The Revenge,
Electric Boogaloo.
Right. Didn't they make another Titanic?
Right, and it's going to follow the same exact route, apparently.
Is it?
All the way to the bottom. I'm just kidding. That was the joke that everybody made when they talked about it.
Yeah.
That is
disturbing. The Titanic 2. This time it's fine.
But there are a lot
of 10-minute movie.
Totally. There are a lot of great ghost stories with the Queen Mary, and Nicole is all about it. And so I'm really kind of excited to pick her brain and find out the stuff that I didn't really get to know down there. I remember touring it. At the time, the Spruce Goose was next door in a hangar.
Did you see anything, interesting?
No, but okay. I mean, if it was that easy, I was a child. I guess maybe they show themselves to children.
Well, there are some places, like there are inns where you have to sign waivers before you go in because it's so haunted.
I think that's part of the marketing.
Well, probably, but
I think they're just all like, how do we
make this scarier? Yeah.
Right. How do we make our stupid inn cool?
Yeah, okay, maybe.
But in the case of the Queen Mary, and I guess I should throw in that we've actually had a guest on the show who was calling us from the Queen Mary.
Really?
Craig Owen.
Yes.
The photographer. Although he was talking about Bizarre LA, his book Bizarre LA. He was actually calling us from the Queen Mary.
Yeah.
That was exciting. So we're actually somewhat
Turns
returning.
out he'd already been dead for 3 hours when we did the interview.
And very exciting. So tune in next week and hear Nicole Strickland educate us about the Queen Mary. You're listening to Radio Wasteland. Thanks for checking us out.